One famous case that supports the social psychological way of evaluating behaviors of the serial killer is infamous serial killer Wayne Gacy, who sexually abused and killed at least 33 men and young boys. Here's a clip giving a synopsis of his childhood.
Gacy Sr. was an uncompromising man who demanded obedience from his children, especially his only son. He expected Johnny to be like the other boys who played stickball, climbed trees, and fished. The father was an avid fisherman and tried to teach his son the sport, but the boy had no interest. Instead, Johnny would much rather cook with his sisters or garden with his mother.
When he wanted to work on flower beds that he put in around the house, it was like, you know, the sissy thing to do. And Dad was very vocal about that.
John wanted his father to know, Dad, I love you, I am your son, but please, let me be Johnny Gacy.
The father would often ridicule Johnny in front of his sisters and other children in the neighborhood.
It's just a constant stream of, you wimp, you know, you're not going to be anything. You can't do this. What are you, one of the girls? Taunts from a father toward his son can be devastating.
While Johnny's father was rigid and emotionally distant, the boy developed a special bond with his mother.
Of Joyce and Lionel Dahmer was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on May 21st, 1960, just before their first anniversary. His name was Jeffrey.
It was a very happy time when Jeff was first born, and for a couple of months it was like everything was brand new and very, very enjoyable and happy, looking forward to the future.
While Jeff's father pursued his chemistry degree, Jeff grew into a bright and loving child.
He was very exuberant. He liked to wrestle. He liked to run around and ham it up the camera. And he liked to play with kids. He liked to get together with them. And he was very outgoing.
Jeff was also an extremely curious child.
He seemed to want to play with things and feel things and get to know their texture, and he seemed to be very much in tune with what's around him. He just wanted to know what was going on.
He had a fascination with animals as a youngster. Once, 4-year-old Jeff watched his father collect the bones of small animals that had died under the house.
I brought him out, put them in a metal pail just to collect them all in one place, and they dropped in with sort of a clanking noise, and Jeff seemed kind of interested in that noise, and he took a hold and let them drop down in too. You know, in retrospect, everything looks grim and dark and sinister. You know, like, could that be the start of something evil? Well, I have to admit it's simply just the curiosity of a child.
Lionel finished his schooling with a PhD in chemistry. The family moved to Ohio, relocating 3 times before settling down on a nearly 2-acre wooded lot in the town of Bath, an hour's drive south of Cleveland. It was then that Lionel began to notice the previously gregarious Jeff had become shy and withdrawn.
He did seem to be awkward socially, and just didn't feel comfortable.
To take his mind off the move, 7-year-old Jeff was given a dog, Frisky, whom he loved dearly.
With people that he knew or his new pet, the next door neighbor boy, he was very relaxed. But there was this shyness and feeling of inferiority that we were concerned about at that time.
Now, one of the first things that may be wrong with Mr. Crunch, Tony, our serial killer, is that he's diagnosed as a psychopath, or the general term for it would be antisocial personality disorder. This is a disorder that affects the brain, also known as APD. It's basically what scientists would call as the general term of being insane. So, as I was saying, I've been studying the mind of a serial killer for a while. It's come to my attention that there may be things physically wrong with the person that may cause them to be a serial killer. So, I shall go more in depth on this. Symptoms of APD, which Mr. Crunch or Tony Crunch might have, would be lack of remorse, irritability and aggressiveness, and inability to conform to social norms. So basically, they have no connection with actually other people. They're completely different and may have social issues. They might not feel the way normal people would feel for another person. So that also may be something that is seen as different. Biological things that actually could be wrong with him are brain damage or mutations in the brain that affect his prefrontal lobe, his hypothalamus, his limbic system. This would all cause loss of control, decisiveness, all those symptoms I told you about earlier, increased regression, poor judgment of things, high violence issues. So all of these things, violence obviously leads to killing. And so that brain problems that he might have are probably the issues biologically that he's having for killing people. Another major serial killer to compare him to would be Arthur Shawcross. He killed 11 people, and he actually suffered from a lot of brain damage. He had 2 fractures, skull fractures that affected areas of his brain. So after said accidents, he actually became, people noticed a change in more violence and aggression and things of that nature. Another thing that can affect the damage of the brain would be alcoholism. I know a lot of people who drink heavily that decreases brain damage and overall just hurts their brain, as decreasing brain cells. And depending on what area of the brain that's affecting, again goes into that aspects of violence and the loss of social norms because they damage their prefrontal lobe. Even their hypothalamus, or their, what's that part of the brain? hippocampus, which is innate memories and your implicit memories of knowing. If you had learned it at some point, you would have forgotten it due to these brain injuries.
So what happens? How are professionals like psychologists and biologists able to formulate a credible and accurate opinion when coming to describe the actions, behaviors, and mentalities of serial killers? The most logical answer is that they really can't. There are many factors that come to determine the behaviors of serial killers of the past and present. There's the biological standpoint, the sociological standpoint, and also the familial way of looking at the behavior. But what about the environment? What about the personality of the individual? We can just use one way of looking at the behaviors of serial killers by just one side. This unilateral way of evaluating serial killers, as well as using it in other areas such as people with mental disorders, has caused us as a people to receive such a false and faulty information. Using all possible dimensions of analysis would be beneficial to everyone, helping us to further our knowledge not only when evaluating serial killers, but other examined subjects as well. The solution is simply to look into various areas of knowledge for answers, not just at 2 or 3 dimensions. If not, this lacking and falsified information will continue to be passed on and believed.
Milk and cereal, milk and cereal, cereal and milk, milk and stereo, 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 milk and cereal, cereal and milk, 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 cereal, yo, 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 cereal, yo, yo, oh yo, cereal, yo, cereal, yo, 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 yo. Let's do it real quick.
Come on! Nick, come on! Nick!
Yeah. Hey, wash my hands.
Oh, let you make bad. Oh!
This is what the Michael Jackson game will do to you.
Drawing.
What? Sorry, I couldn't find you.